Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another show of Unfinished Business. I have a great panel of experts joining me tonight. I have Brittany Smalls, the Pennsylvania State Coordinator of Black Voters Matter Fund, and Jean Handley, the Dauphin County Coordinator of Fair Districts PA. Tonight, we're going to talk about the 2020 census and what it means for you. Every 10 years, the federal government conducts a population count of everyone in the United States. Data from the census provides the basis for distributing more than $675 billion dollars in federal funds annually to communities across the country to support vital programs such as housing, education, transportation, employment, healthcare, and public policy. They are used to redraw the boundaries of congressional and state legislative districts and accurately determine the number of seats each state has in the U.S. House of Representatives. Around March of this year, you should have received an invitation to complete the 2020 census. Once that invitation arrives, you should respond for your home in one of three ways: either online, which is how I completed my census. You can also complete the census by phone or by mail. When you do respond to the census, you'll tell the Census Bureau where you live as of April 1st. People have until December of this year to complete the census. So, one of the questions I always get is, why is this important for me? Why should I respond to the census? And while it's not only your civic duty, like voting is, it also affects the amount of funding your community receives and how your community plans for the future and your representation in government. A lot of times people complain about their choices as far as who they can vote for, but the way the lines are drawn, a lot of times our elected officials choose their voters instead of the voters choosing their elected officials, which is how it should be. So, Brittany, tell us a little bit about your organization and how the redistricting of the lines can marginalize communities.
Okay, so Black Voters Matter is an organization to help build power in African American communities and help with assisting with understanding that we can really make a difference when it comes to deciding who we want to represent us in office and understanding the power that we have if we come together and assist organizations that are already on the ground with the support they need to gain visibility or resources or even financial support to do the work that they're doing to increase the voter turnout in African American communities. And also understanding that we can move forward and also just understanding our power again, like just reiterating that. And also, gerrymandering is a big part of that because you think about, you know, for an example, you have someone who is in prison and they're in one of the rural counties, and those counties are getting the financial support from that person who's receiving resources from the family members in their communities when in fact that support should be going back to the community where the individual actually resides.
Why do you think, particularly Black communities, don't fill out the census as large and as big numbers as other communities?
I think it's just the understanding of the importance of the census. I think sometimes when we have people, that are numerators that are going out knocking on the doors, I don't think they really have a sense of understanding. They just think, oh, the government's trying to get my information. They're not really trying to. This I don't know how this can help me, and they don't understand that if we are counted correctly and we have all that support, that brings more resources to our communities. So it's just more of breaking it down and being patient with the folks in our communities so they can understand how important it is.
And Jean, living here in Dauphin County, I understand the importance of the redistricting aspect of the census. Before the Supreme Court struck down our congressional maps, Dauphin County was split into three congressional districts. I knew people who lived across the street from each other, but were in different districts. Now we're all in one complete district. And I know that's something you've been fighting for to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, the census really impacts how redistricting is done. And you can go back and look at how they, and every 10 years, as you mentioned, they do the census, and then they have to reapportion seats. And they take the 435 seats in Congress and they reapportion them based on population across the entire United States. And as you said, in Dauphin County, we had, after the 2011 redistricting process, the people that were in charge at the time drew the districts so that Dauphin County was split into 3 congressional districts. And it's really, really difficult to represent the people of Dauphin County across 3 different representatives, as you well know. The Supreme Court decision, as you also mentioned, changed that, and they negated it, but it was only a temporary kind of thing, and it will only carry us through this next redistricting. Or not the next redistricting, I'm sorry, through this next election. So now, as you mentioned, Dauphin County is all in 1 congressional district, but that is very, very potential to change again and go back to being gerrymandered into multiple potential congressional districts. And the same is true with the state legislative districts too. I mean, we could get into that, but because they're redistricted also. So this census, if you don't get an accurate count of the people in the United States, but let's break it down in Pennsylvania, if you don't get an accurate count, it affects all the things that you mentioned about housing and the money that's distributed from the federal government, but it's going to affect how you're represented in Congress or in our General Assembly here down in Harrisburg. And people don't understand that. They don't understand, when we've been fighting for this, they don't understand how the census impacts redistricting, which impacts how they're represented. And I agree with Brittany as far as people just, it's an educational process. People just don't understand how important this is, the census is, to a multitude of things. The other thing that's really important that people don't understand is, you know, when they go to the presidential election, the electoral college is determined, how many seats we have as electors is determined in part by the number of representatives we have. And so if we have 18 representatives like we do right now and 2 senators, we have 20 electors, okay, to vote for the president, you know, in the electoral college. We're going to lose a seat this time. And so we're going to go to 17 congressional seats probably and still have 2 senators. So we'll go to 19. So we're going to lose some representation.
So Brittany, is your organization involved at all with going into the communities and trying to get more people to fill out the census? Is there any type of educational campaign that your organization is doing?
Yes, we're definitely involved with the census process. With COVID-19, it's been a lot of restrictions going on, but we've been trying to do our part and be creative. One of the initiatives I did was to go on live and actually fill my census out, and did a Facebook Live, just something simple on Facebook, and shared it to different pages and allowed people to watch me fill out my census and see how simple the process was. We also have been a part of the national organization of Census 2020 and supporting their efforts and making sure the different campaigns that they are putting out, that we are creating visibility around it. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has been virtual, but we've been reaching out to other organizations that are doing maybe text banking or phone banking, and try to support those efforts.
Okay. Jean, there were a couple pieces of legislation that Fair Districts PA, and I want to make sure everyone knows that both of these organizations these women represent are nonpartisan. Gerrymandering is not a partisan issue. It's an incumbent issue. So I definitely want to make that clear to everyone. But your organization was working on this bill for over 3 years, you had mentioned. And the basis of it was to take the redistricting process away from the legislators and put it in an independent commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it was during the last legislative session, um, and we had bills there, and they didn't get um, they didn't get through, and in many cases didn't even get a vote. Okay, and so then when this session started, we introduced a, similar bills, and what we wanted was an independent citizens commission to do both congressional and state legislative redistricting, and that would have been much more transparent and fair and impartial. And once again, um, it looks like that has failed at this point. Today was one of the days where it was one of our last chances to get the independent commission a vote, and it appears that we were unable to do that. So, but we haven't given up. I mean, there are other ways for reform and to bring more people into the process, because gerrymandering is a form of voter suppression. And Brittany, I mean, you know this better than anybody. And what they did to Harrisburg
Yeah.
in the last redistricting, especially in the congressional, where they cracked or packed, and in this case, they cracked Harrisburg and took a little teeny piece of Harrisburg. I mean, they took Harrisburg and they put it in with York and Cumberland, and they basically negated Harrisburg, which is urban, not real wealthy districts, and they cracked those people, and those people didn't have any representation, and that's what happens with this redistricting kind of thing. If people don't, if we don't get some reform to it.
What are some other communities also, other than communities of color, that votes can be marginalized?
Uh, Brittany, you probably have a list of them also, but I mean it's any um, it's people of color that really get marginalized.
Yes.
There are I wouldn't want to say, for example, maybe even some of the religious communities might get marginalized in certain areas. Brittany,
I would even
what are
go
your
further to
examples?
say that the immigrants
Yes.
you know it, the citizens that are not actual people who are not actual citizens of this country, and they don't understand they need to complete the census as well and be a part of that process because they need to be counted so we can get support again, more resources to that community. So we definitely don't want to forget about our illegal immigrants or anything like that.
My
I think
problem with
yeah.
gerrymandering is that it doesn't give us as voters a choice.
Yeah.
That's one of my biggest problems, that we deserve competitive districts so that elected officials and candidates actually have to work for our vote instead of getting reelected year after year without actually having to do anything.
Yeah.
Um, and in your organization, Brittany, that's also statewide. Do you find that in communities, in Black communities, that their elected officials don't really work the issues of that community because they don't feel as threatened as far as getting reelected?
I think I see them in like the rural areas, a lot of the rural areas I work in. We have some small counties that don't get a lot of support or a lot of visibility, and they um you can see the unfairness and the support. Even with vote by mail, that was a
Right.
big a big it just didn't go well this last term. Primary didn't go well, and so you can actually see the difference, and you can see. I mean, it's a list of things that we deal with in our communities, African American communities. Education is just we're just treated unfair across the board.
It negates, or it, like you said, Rogette, you don't have a choice in many cases. I mean, and
Yeah,
if you look at the number of elections in the last cycle, even in 2018, the state elections, where either there was no candidate from another major party running against the other candidate. In other words, there wasn't any competition, so the person that was running won in their primary,
Mm-hmm.
or they won by greater than a 10% margin, which isn't competitive at all. And what that does, when I say marginalizes it, or it discourages voters and its suppression, because people say, well, why bother? I mean, why should I go out and vote if I don't have a voice, and that guy or that woman is going to win anyway?
Yeah.
And it happens in both Democrat and Republican. Um, Pennsylvania happens to be right now governed by the process is governed by the Republicans, but the Democrats, I mean, it happens in all the districts, and it's really voter suppression, and it's just not fair.
Well, but because it's an incumbency issue, and I'll ask Brittany first, since this is an incumbency issue, but they're the ones that have to change the law to make the process more fair. So that's what's ironic about it.
But I mean,
So you're actually asking them to almost put their jobs at risk. Now, I can only speak for myself, but I believe in term limits. I believe that these public offices should be public service again and not permanent career jobs. I think that would take a lot of the problems that we have out of the process. But we don't have that for all of our offices. So how do we get them? It's easy to get them to sign on to a bill, but how do we get them to actually make the changes that are needed?
but I think, to be fair, term limits are good, but if you have somebody who's representing that seat and really doing the work to build up their communities, then I mean, of course we will want them to get in office again, and especially with the state rep seats. And the Republican Party is um the leading party right now in Harrisburg, and there's a lot of changes that we want to see made, but there's a lot of backlash too. So they're not able to move forward with some of the bills getting passed that we need to get passed to receive the support we need in our communities.
Rogette, to add to that, Rogette, and just because we've experienced this so much, and it goes not just this issue, I mean, it goes to a whole number of issues that Brittany has kind of alluded to also. But because of the way that the rules are structured within our General Assembly, it gives so much power to so few individuals. For example, the Speaker of the House, or the President pro tem of the Senate, or the committee chairman. One person can kill a bill. No matter how many co-sponsors you have or how much public support, a committee chair can refuse to bring it up, or it can be killed by, as I said, the Speaker of the House or the President pro tem, or I mean, and that's why you don't see a lot of this stuff. And it goes back to what you said. It's about going against their own interests. I mean, they do not want to give up power, and
Well,
and
it takes them so long to get power. Those positions are based on longevity.
yeah.
You're not going to be a freshman state rep and become Speaker of the House.
Okay.
So if we're not going to have term limits, then what's the solution? What's another solution that we have? Because you're right, it takes you what, 10 to 20 years to get that position. You're not going to want to give it up.
Now, interestingly, Brian Cutler, who is now Speaker of the House after Herzog left, he hasn't been there that long. But you're right. I mean, it's a seniority position, and the same thing in many cases for the committee chairs, and they don't want to give up power, and they don't want to have their caucuses have to take tough votes,
Yep.
and so they won't bring up the bill
Yep.
to be in committee or whatever, because if they're seen to make a tough vote, that could work against them. And so we have seen, I mean, this has been an education for me, but how do we change things? It's public support. It's the media. It's public pushing, and it's in some ways the courts and you have to bring that all together. And, I mean, I wish I had the answer because we would have gotten our bills passed. Brittany, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. And so it's just disheartening because it further pushes support from the community and it further makes us distrustful of the system.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we need fairer districts too, because a lot, and we see this on the state, federal, and even local levels, a lot of times our elected officials are more loyal to the party leadership than they are to the people the voters or the residents that they represent. But I guess that's where your organization comes into play, Brittany, is that you teach Black communities on the power of their vote. And
Yes.
we do see a lot of times where if the community gets behind a good candidate, they
Mm-hmm.
can win. They definitely can win, and we have seen that happen before. But I'm sure that's a big part of your organization is to teach people about that power and to support candidates that do have their own interests at heart.
Yeah, and because a lot of times we have people that come into our communities that are probably doing a great job, but it's still a distrust there. And so,
Right.
why not support organizations that are already in those communities, or groom somebody that's in the community to take charge and be of leadership? So, because they will definitely be able to engage with their community versus somebody coming in trying to give them information. I speak about that often because we it's just we have to move forward differently.
And of course, money is also an issue.
Yes.
I am also a firm believer if we can get all the money out of the politics, we would have more options with our candidates as well. When you think of the money between the presidency, the U.S. Senate, and Congress alone, that's before we get to the state legislatures and governorships, we could probably give every American another stimulus check. When you think of the money these offices are going to be, paying out between now and November 3rd. It's ridiculous the money you need to run for some of these offices.
Agreed.
And that's one of the things. Um, First of all, as you both know, we have some of the worst campaign finance laws in in the country. I mean, basically anything goes as far as money in your campaigns and things. And and so that's a problem. And and what happens is that if you don't support the party leadership, a lot of times they'll threaten that you won't get your funds or you won't get that kind of thing. And so it's a way this the gerrymandering, which ties into all this, is a way of keeping good representation down too. I mean, because the legislators, the rank and file, become concerned or afraid or whatever, and they don't want to buck party leadership because they want to protect themselves, and that's difficult too.
Right. It's the chicken and the egg syndrome. You want support from your party, obviously, but unfortunately, no one gives you anything for free. So
Right.
there's a price. There's a price for everything too. So you do feel for some of these elected officials. They want to do the right thing, but you have to be in the position to be able to do good.
Or
So
also, I think if the finances is going to be a part of it, um, open up the opportunities for people who are in these marginalized communities to be a part of the process and
there's
have even career opportunities because they're
well,
not.
that's very true. And I actually wrote an article on this that talked about the lack of diversity with staff on state and federal levels. And I know one of the things I like to ask candidates is, do you have diversity on your campaign staff? Because a lot of times when they win, they take their campaign staff with them.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, and there's, as we all know, and this is a different topic, but they're with the race relations now with all of the protests and marches. And I see some of these elected officials, but there's no one in their offices that look like me.
No.
So, I need more than a Black Lives Matter sign.
Yes. What does your executive team look like?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
even I was so shocked. One of the progressive candidates, I said, there's no diversity in your camp, but you're speaking about this. How
Right.
can we trust you?
Right. And I think that's another reason why people don't get involved with the process, because
Yeah.
it's a lot of lip service. But with the coronavirus, I did read that starting in August, they're going to start knocking on people's doors to make sure they fill out the census forms. And I know a lot of people who aren't going to want to answer their doors. So both of you mentioned some different campaigns going on now to try to get the word out to people to
Mhm.
fill it out. Can you educate all of us on what some of those campaigns are so people can fill out the census without getting that knock at the door?
Well, I mean, there's opportunity. You can do it by phone. You can do it by mail. You can do it by um, online. You can go to the website and fill out the application. So there's so many other opportunities. That's like the last option to you have to answer your door. Because I know me personally, I've spoken before. I don't answer my door because it's just not safe most of the times. So I definitely would have people use the other options, and we also took advantage of highlighting different groups like Religious Week and um voting like Children's Week, and just creating, I told you, the different campaigns that we put out there on social media. I mean, I know even some of our young voters are getting creative and creating TikToks because somebody spoke about this yesterday, that they post a lot of meaningful things, but they got more traction on their TikToks. So we
Right.
really have to go where people are.
That's very true. That's very true.
Mhm.
And Jean, with fair districts, you mentioned that even though the bills are dead, there are other ways to try to make the process of redistricting more fair next year. What can people do to help the organization try to make those issues a reality?
Well, as I said, some of the bills that we've been advocating for in the past probably are dead at this point. And so new bills are coming out. And one of them is HB 2638,
Mhm.
which was introduced just last week by uh, Wendy Thomas, I believe, in Fox. And that's a bill. And there will be one by Thomas Killian in the Senate also, which will be the same bill. It'll just be a different number. And it'll be a Senate bill. But what those do is establish very strict criteria for what data you can use, and how you can draw the districts and how you can't draw the districts, and the splits that are allowed as far as county splits or municipal splits or any of that kind of thing. And also transparency requirements so that people can get involved in the process when they do start to redistrict. They can go to public meetings and see what's going on. They can have their input put in there. They can even maybe submit their own maps. So these bills, HB 2638 and whatever the Senate bill will be, we're asking people, and we're going to be putting all of our efforts behind probably those bills coming up. And since they don't require a constitutional amendment, they are much um, less difficult to try to get attention and even get passed. So that's what we're looking at. And as far as the census kind of thing, on our website and on our social media and everything, not only do we advocate for our bills, we are also talking about the census and voting and all of that too, and trying to get and giving links and all that to where they can find the information. So that hopefully will draw some people too.
Right, because it only happens once every 10 years.
Yeah, and as far as the redistricting, I hate to say it, but we're going to be stuck with what we got for 10 years
Right.
after on this 2021 redistricting, and we're still trying to get it so that at least if we can't get an independent commission, we can at least get strict rules and regulations on how to do it, and the transparency part of it. So
Right. And if there aren't better rules, I'm willing to bet we're going to have another court case. Because
Mm.
as you mentioned, the legislature is Republican controlled. We have a Democrat governor. So, the two sides are going to have to work together.
that, and on the state legislative, because the state legislative districts are just as bad as the congressional district was, or if
Oh,
not
yes.
potentially worse.
Oh,
I
the
think worse.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
worse.
Yeah. And so we've got and you're talking about the control of it. Well, it was controlled in 2011 by the Republicans, and usually the fifth person on the LRC, the Legislative Reapportionment Commission, that does the state legislative districts
Mhm.
is picked by the state Supreme Court. And so because the court has a tendency to lean Democrat, because there's 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans on there, when they pick that fifth person, if they do, the potential is that the Democrats are going to control the state legislative redistricting process.
We have a question here from Philip. He wants to ask, since the Governor Wolf has shut down gatherings because the coronavirus rates are starting to go up in Pennsylvania, what can he do to help with voter registrations in public areas? Brittany, do you have any suggestions for Philip?
Well, I just been utilizing every opportunity I can get. So we have had civil unrest protests going on. So we've been taking those opportunities safely, trying to do it as safely as we can to register people to vote. Also, again, utilize your virtual space because this is where we're headed, in the future. So, um, talk about it on social media. Call a friend. I know that with Black Voters Matter, we do a pledge to talk to 5 friends and family members, and you can fill out you can text 797979. We matter to 79 #797979, and then it's a form you can fill out to be a part of the process. So there's so many. You just have to get very creative during this time. And again, there's civil unrest protests. Wear your mask, wear your gloves, have your Lysol spray, and do what you can.
So
And what's
the other
great
thing,
is you can register to vote online now too. So I
Yes,
just wanted to
yes.
point
yeah.
that out as well.
Share the link on your social media.
Jean, did you have a response for Philip?
The one thing I was going to say also is that he may want to contact the League of Women Voters, and see if they have any. They may be doing some smaller events or something also, or they might have some guidelines that might be helpful for him too. So they could contact League of Women Voters on Forester Street. So.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, but I want to give both of you a chance to give closing remarks. Brittany, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, again, Rogette, thank you for this opportunity to speak to your listeners. And I just want to encourage everybody to complete your census if you haven't already. Um, I'm trying to remember the link, census 2020 census.org. 2020
It's
census.org.
2020 census.gov.
.gov. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
2020
right.
census.gov. Please complete your census. It's very imperative for our communities. We don't want to wait another 10 years. We need the resources now, and we want to get reputable people in office. We want to make sure that the geographic lines are all, work taken care of, especially in the state legislature in Pennsylvania. And again, if you want to learn more about Black Voters Matter, please text 797979. We matter to 797979. There's a link that's going to pop up on your phone. Fill out that short form, and we will be in touch.
Jean?
Rogette, thank you also for allowing me to speak tonight. And as far as what Brittany said, I support and agree with all of that. Um, it is incredibly important that people understand that this census affects all aspects of their lives, whether it's their representation, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's the SNAP program, whether it's transportation and infrastructure, or the SNAP program, or myriads of other programs and federal funding. And if we don't get an accurate count, if that census doesn't have an accurate count, we're going to lose big time in all those areas. And so I urge people to fill out that census. Go to 2020census.gov. As far as the redistricting process and um, gerrymandering, I would urge people to go to our website, which is fairdistrictspa.com, or they can go to the Fair Districts Facebook page and learn more about that too, and possibly, hopefully, get involved and help us push some of that for fairer districts. But it hinges on getting an accurate count of the people, and that's not just citizens; that's everybody in the country and in Pennsylvania.
Well, I would like to thank both of you for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank everyone who did watch. For those of you who missed the show, you will be able to watch the replay afterwards. I'm a firm believer that change happens at the ballot box.
Mhm.
And the only way to get that change is to elect people who care about the issues that we as residents and community members believe in. And that starts with the census, with getting that accurate count, and it ends with getting district lines that are competitive so that candidates have to compete for our votes. That's the way we get them to care about our issues. So I agree with what both of you mentioned. Again, those where English isn't your first language, you can also go to the 2020 census.gov website, and there are phone numbers in about 10 different languages where you can call and fill out the census form that way as well. So there's so many different ways to fill it out so that you do count, and hopefully you can get the representation that you deserve. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you all as well. Until
Thank
next week.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rogette. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank
Bye.
you, Jean.